The porch light flickers once, then dies. She stands motionless on the sidewalk, clutching a crumpled flyer in her hand. Its corners damp with sweat and drizzle. On it, two identical faces smiling. Unblinking, stare out into a world that's already forgotten how loud their laughter used to be. The house hasn't changed. Not really. The peeling white trim. The wind chimes that never sang right. The porch swing still strung up with frayed rope. It's all still there. But it feels different now. Like something is watching from inside. Like the walls themselves remember what happened and haven't yet decided to forgive. A soft wind moves through the overgrown garden, rustling dead leaves along the path where her daughters used to chase fireflies. Beth doesn't blink. The front door is closed, but not locked. It never was. Safety here was always just a story they told each other to sleep better at night. Somewhere deep inside the house, a clock ticks. Not a loud tick, not the kind that counts down to something. It's slower, sadder, like a heartbeat trying to remember what it used to love. She takes one step forward, then another, her boots cracking the silence like bone on bone. She hasn't been inside since the day she left, since the day he said she'd regret walking out. But now, the silence inside is calling her name, not with rage, not with urgency, with something colder, something that's been waiting. Because the truth never really disappears. It just hides. Sometimes behind a locked bookcase, and sometimes behind a smile. And this house, it knows exactly where both are buried. This is the story of what was hidden, and what it cost to bring it into the light. The house looked the same, but it wasn't. Beth stood in the driveway, the wind tugging gently at her coat as if trying to pull her away. 10 days ago, she'd driven off with a packed suitcase and a whisper of hope. She told herself she'd be back soon once she had a better place. Once things calmed down, but nothing had calmed. And now, two little faces smiled from every lamppost in town, but not from the windows of the home they once knew. She stepped up the cracked path. The white paint peeled like old skin from the siding. Weeds curled up through the flower beds she used to tend every Sunday morning. When she reached for the door, the same old key turned in the lock. He hadn't changed it. He never did. Not when it mattered. Inside, the air was thick like something left too long in a sealed box. There was the faint reek of spilled whiskey under layers of must and silence. The house didn't breathe the way it used to. It hunched. Detective Morris rose from a worn chair in the living room. He had the calm, heavy eyes of someone who had seen too much and somehow stayed kind. Beside him, Peter slumped on the couch, unshaven and blotchy, his eyes too wet and too dry at the same time. A glass of something amber balanced on the armrest, half empty or half full. Beth wasn't sure anymore. Across from him sat Clare, Peter's mother, her thin hands wringing a lace-edged handkerchief into a sad knot. She didn't look up, didn't speak, just twisted fabric and trembled. No one said the girls' names. Not right away. But they hovered there, on every surface, in every framed photo. Some now tilted. Others face down as if they couldn't bear to witness what had become of this family. Detective Morris gestured gently for Beth to sit. She chose the ottoman, halfway between him and the hearth. Not too close to Peter. Not too far from the door. And then Peter spoke. Or tried to. They were just playing. He mumbled, looking past her, beyond her, into something else. Out back. Hide and seek. I counted to 20. When I looked, they were gone. Gone. The word dropped into the room like a stone into still water. But the water didn't move. It just thickened. Beth's throat tightened. She stared at Peter, searching for the man she once trusted enough to build a life with. But all she saw now was the wreckage, the slack mouth, the stained shirt, the guilt that dressed itself up as defiance. "Did you lock the gate?" Morris asked gently. Peter shrugged. "I think I forgot. Took the trash out earlier." Beth closed her eyes. That gate had been a point of argument so many times. She'd asked, pleaded, begged him to secure it. And now it was part of a story that didn't feel like truth. Then she noticed Clare again. Every time the old floorboards creaked or Peter shifted, Clare flinched like a ghost bracing for thunder. Her eyes kept darting toward the kitchen, toward the study, away. Beth glanced around, and then something snagged. The girls' toothbrushes, usually shaped like little animals, perched in a bright pink holder on the bathroom counter, were gone. So were their hairbrushes. She checked quietly, moving through the house like someone chasing her own shadow. No tiny barrettes. No tangles of elastic bands. The drawers in the girls' room were too tidy. Wiped clean. Back in the kitchen, Peter poured another drink. She watched his hands too steady for a grieving father. "The girls' things," she said softly. "Where are they?" He didn't look up. "Probably got misplaced when I cleaned." Beth stared at the overflowing sink, the unmade bed, the dust on every surface. "You haven't cleaned anything." "Peter." He turned then, slow and hard. "Don't start. Not here. Not now." But the silence that followed was louder than the words. Beth felt it press against her chest like a hand steady. Insistent. Her instincts rose like a tide. Something was wrong. Not just lost child wrong. Not just bad parent wrong. Something deeper. The girls were missing, but so was the truth. And the house knew it. It creaked beneath their feet like it was trying to speak. But that wasn't the end. Because somewhere, behind that silence, someone was still listening. There was something about the bookcase. It loomed over the room like a silent witness. Tall and dust-slick. Its shelves filled with untouched hardcovers, medical textbooks, child psychology volumes. A leather-bound copy of The Secret Garden that Beth remembered gifting Peter on their first anniversary. But now, he watched it the way a prisoner watches a locked door, or maybe a captor watches the key. "Don't move those books," Peter snapped, his voice slicing the air as Detective Morris reached toward the second shelf. "I have a system." A silence fell brittle and sharp. Even the ticking clock on the wall seemed to hesitate. Clare, perched like a shadow in the corner, twisted her handkerchief until it looked like it might tear. Her lips parted, as if a truth had finally clawed its way to the edge of her mouth. But then the floor creaked. Peter's head turned, and just like that, the fear returned to Clare's eyes fast and full. Like a tide. Beth watched it all. The flick of Peter's gaze to the shelf, the way he positioned himself between Morris and the wall, the way Claire's voice would rise, then die in her throat. The moment he entered a room, something was wrong. Not abstract or emotional. Tangible. Spatial. The girls' toothbrushes were gone. Their hairbrushes, too. Small things that wouldn't matter to a kidnapper, but that would to a man desperate to maintain a sense of control and the illusion of care. Beth's instincts coiled in her gut like a storm refusing to break. The truth wasn't buried. It wasn't even locked. It was right there, staring back from behind the spines of old books. And it was about to open. Beth drove through the trees that night, like the forest itself was closing in. Her hands trembled on the wheel. Headlights slicing shadows apart, but never quite making her feel seen. Not after what Peter had said. Not after he'd turned it all around on her. Beth drove through the trees that night, like the forest itself was closing in. Her hands trembled on the wheel. Headlights slicing shadows apart, but never quite making her feel seen. Not after what Peter had said. Not after he'd turned it all around on her. "You left us," he hissed. "You've done it before," he reminded her. "When the twins were newborns. When you couldn't even hold them without crying." She'd barely gotten the keys into the camper door before she collapsed inside. The space was small. Plain, but hers. The air was cold and still. A photo of the girl sat on the shelf, smiling, oblivious, as if nothing had changed. Beth wrapped herself in a blanket and wept. Not just for what she feared, but for what she was starting to believe. Then a knock. Soft, hesitant, as though whoever stood outside didn't want to be heard by the wrong person. She opened the door to find Clare. Air windblown, cheeks hollow, her coat damp with evening fog. "I couldn't stay quiet," Clare whispered. Her hands trembled at her sides like leaves in wind. "Not after what I saw." Beth stepped aside. Clare didn't wait for permission. She just walked in, sat at the dinette, and whispered the words that would rewrite everything. "They're alive," she said, her voice shaking. "Emma, Lily, they're still in the house." Beth blinked. "What?" "There's a room," Clare said. "Behind the bookcase. Peter built it years ago. He said it was in case of a break-in. But he changed it. He made it." She couldn't say the word. "A prison." Beth staggered back, the air thick and suffocating. "You saw them?" "This morning." Clare nodded. "He was in the shower. I dropped a book, and when I went to put it back, the shelf moved." She covered her mouth, eyes wide with shame. They were inside, playing quietly. "Emma saw me," she smiled. "She said they were waiting for Mommy to come find them. She thought it was a game." Beth felt the walls of the camper begin to tilt. Her daughters had never been missing. Not really. They had been hidden. Not by strangers. Not by chance. By him. By the man who still called himself their father. And the house that rotting, whiskey-stained house had swallowed them whole. But now she knew where to look. And the truth, the one Peter had built into the walls, was about to come undone. The flashing light spilled through the cracks in the camper like blood through gauze. Red. Blue. Red again. Outside. Voices barked orders into the night. Inside. Everything was still. The gun lay on the floor like a confession. Peter knelt, sobbing, his shoulders shaking beneath the weight of a truth he could no longer carry. Beth couldn't move. Her fingers were locked around the edge of the dinette table, knuckles white, her body trembling but frozen in place. Her ears rang from the silence after the sirens, that uncanny hush that follows after something almost broke. But didn't. She could still smell the gun oil in the air, still feel the sweat beading behind her knees. The only thing grounding her was Clare, pale and crying, gripping her hand so tightly it hurt. Two officers restrained Peter gently, as if afraid even handcuffs might shatter him further. He didn't resist. He just kept saying it, over and over. I just wanted to keep my daughters. I just wanted to keep my daughters. Detective Morris arrived seconds later, breathless, eyes scanning the scene. Mrs. Harmon, he asked, low and urgent. Beth turned slowly, and for the first time since this nightmare began, she said it aloud. There's a hidden room, she whispered, behind the bookcase, in Peter's study. Morris didn't flinch, didn't question. He simply raised his radio. We need a team at 421 Briar Hollow. Check the office. There's a hidden room behind the bookcase. And just like that, the hunt shifted. But that wasn't the end. It was only the door. The bookcase gave way with the softest click. Not the sound of wood, but of breath held too long, of something secret, splitting open. Inside, a hush lived in the air, not silence, but the kind of stillness you find in forgotten places. A room with no windows, no light except for a single bulb that hummed faintly overhead. And on the floor, a mattress, small, faded, its covers tangled around two tiny bodies. Beth froze. The girls were there. Emma, Lily, curled together, like they had grown into one heartbeat. Surrounding them were all the things that had gone missing. The brushes, the pajamas, a chipped ceramic lamp with painted butterflies, toys stacked too neatly for children to have done it themselves. One of the twins lifted her head, air must, eyes dazed from too much dark. Mommy. Beth collapsed to her knees. The breath left her. No scream, no cry, just a quiet exhale like air escaping a grave. She reached out, and they ran to her, small arms around her neck, tiny hands grasping for safety. And as she clung to them, shaking, sobbing, whispering their names over and over, she realized this room had not been made in fear. It had been built in obsession. A prison dressed like a playroom, a hiding place with no escape. Peter hadn't lost the girls. He had locked them away to keep them. Not from danger, from their own mother. And Clare, standing in the doorway, trembling, had seen it too late. But not too late to change the ending. Not too late to say enough. The hospital was cold under its fluorescent lights. The smell of antiseptic clinging to everything. But Beth didn't care. She held the girls while nurses moved quietly around them. murmuring soft questions and scanning for signs of harm. Emma tugged her sleeve. "Why did Daddy say you were lost?" Beth looked into her daughter's face and felt the words tear something open inside her. "I wasn't lost. Baby," she whispered. "I was looking for you. Every single day." Lily leaned against her chest. "Why did the hiding game last so long?" Beth didn't answer right away. "Because how do you tell your child that love, when twisted, can look like fear? That sometimes the person who says they're protecting you is the one you need protecting from?" She just kissed their heads, tucked them in close, let them breathe against her skin like they were still inside her, like they had never left. In the waiting room, Clare sat silently, a cup of untouched coffee cooling in her hands. Her voice was quiet when it came like dust rising from an old box left sealed too long. "I made this mistake before," she said. "With Peter's father, I stayed quiet when I should have spoken. I told myself I was protecting him." Beth turned to her. And this time, Claire's eyes shimmered, not from tears but from the weight of decades. "This time, I couldn't lie to myself anymore. He won't do it again." Beth nodded. She didn't forgive Peter. Not now. Maybe not ever. But she forgave herself. For not seeing sooner. For fearing she might become what she'd escaped. And in that sterile hallway, holding the hands of her daughters, Beth made a promise. The cycle ends here. No more secrets. No more silence. Because sometimes, the most dangerous thing is the love that never learned how to let go. And sometimes, survival means learning when to walk away and when to open the door. Even the ones hidden behind bookcases. Even the ones locked inside you. And just like that, the long night began to lift. Beth holds her daughters in the hush before morning, their warmth against her chest like proof that love, real love, returns. Not through force, not through fear, but through a whisper, through a door finally opened. Some wounds don't bleed. They sit behind walls, dressed like care, decorated with toys, hidden in the places we trust the most. But truth has a way of seeping through. It lives in a child's voice asking, "Why was the game so long?" It echoes in the silence of a woman who finally says, "No more." The case isn't over. The questions haven't stopped. But in this moment, wrapped in quiet arms and a mother's promise, something is healing. The bookcase closed for the last time. And still, something lingers behind it. If this story stayed with you, let us know below. Subscribe for the next piece of the truth when it surfaces. And if you know someone who's still searching in the dark, share this story.